Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the third episode of the Offbend podcast. Quick intro here, just before we get started. Obviously, this is the podcast where we talk about everything going on in the industry, and then as well as our own journey as a startup production company. Today, we had planned to have our co-head of production on the operations and logistics side, Marshal Hodges, on with us. Unfortunately, logistically, that just wasn't going to work with the timing. We had to record this episode a little bit later due to some unforeseen circumstances, but he remains excited and willing and ready to come on to the next episode, and we're super excited to have him. We think everybody will really enjoy what he has to say. He brings a lot of valuable, knowledge and insight on the film industry, and then obviously he's playing an integral role on our internal projects, and we're really excited to talk more about those and how things are going. But yeah, this time you won't be with us. You're stuck with just us two. We're going to go through our normal industry news segment, film review, and then our main topic of discussion before wrapping it up for today. But again, we're super excited to have him on. He'll be on the next episode. And yeah, without further ado, we can move into the industry news segment. So we have a few here that we're going to go through. And we're going to give a little bit more of a detailed, have a little bit of a conversation about it. And then there's a few that I'm just going to rattle off, as headlines to make sure they're mentioned, but maybe we won't go too in depth on them, and we can kind of just say them, brush over them. If anybody wants to start a conversation about any of this, obviously the comments are always open on all of our platforms, and we not only allow, comments, but we encourage them. We want the conversation to continue, and we'd love to talk to all of you. Anyways, the first one we have here is the Sundance Film Festival is relocating to Boulder, Colorado in 2027. So after 45 years in Utah, the Sundance Film Festival announced that it's moving, again, starting in 2027. Apparently, this decision aims to embrace new opportunities and audiences in the independent film scene. I'm not sure where I sit on this. In my opinion, Sundance has been successful in Utah for so long. It's kind of associated with it at this point. It's been there for almost 50 years. I guess I would have to hear a more detailed explanation as to why they're moving, but Carson, I don't know about you. I mean, are you on the side of things should stay the same? They should keep operating the way that they were working before, kind of if it ain't broke, don't fix it mindset? Or are you all about embracing new opportunities and trying new things and, not necessarily taking risks, because I'm an advocate for that as well. But, something like this that's beloved and, everyone in the film industry, knows what it is, takes part in it in some way or another. I'm curious what you think about this in general.
I think I could go either way. I think some traditions, are the reason that got you to a certain point. It's kind of hard to go away from that, but like you said, I'm kind of interested to see if there's a whole other reason that they moved. Maybe they're moving to a bigger location and they're wanting to expand the film festival rather than just keep it the same, because sometimes change is good and can help expand what you've already had success on. And so I think just finding that deeper reasoning might help alleviate some pain of changing from what they've done in the past.
No, for sure. And yeah, like you said, we're saying here, there's a lot going on with, in my opinion, there's a lot going on behind the scenes that we have no idea. So there's probably a lot that plays into this decision. Some of it could be financial. Some of it could be, they just want to try something new. They're bored of what they have been doing. There could be a number of reasons that go into this, but overall, I'm excited, and I know it kind of sucks we never got to go to a Sundance in Utah, but we'll be a part of the new paradigm as it begins. Starting in 27. Well, actually, if we're going to go in 26, we'll be there because it's not moving until 27. So we'll get to experience the very last one that's in Utah, and then we'll get to experience the first one that's in Boulder. So that'll be really exciting. But yeah, we'll do our best to gather all of the differences, pros and cons of each one, whatever, and offer our perspective. Being able to do each one, back to back, as only doing each one once, not having a long storied experience going. I think that'll be an interesting perspective. Moving on. So it was announced that Skydance Media and Paramount Global are having an $8 billion with a B merger. Well, they've agreed to it, but it's expected to close in April, but it's pending, regulatory approvals right now. Carson, I'm interested, not necessarily in this one in particular, but it offers an interesting question, right? How do you feel about larger production companies merging together and becoming even bigger, right? Because what Paramount's behind, but Skydance, they're behind TV series like Reacher. They're behind a lot of different movies and stuff. I think they were a part of Top Gun Maverick, things like that. So they're pretty big as well. So this is like kind of two big players merging here. And it's not the biggest ones, but how do you feel about that? How do you feel about taking advantage of creative libraries and merging together and trying to find those synergies? You think it's something like in our business that we will seek out, or strategically speaking, in your ideal world, obviously we have no idea what's going to happen, but yeah, how would you approach that, and what do you think about the concept in general?
I feel like it's an interesting concept because it'll allow more perspective on like creative like productions. But at the same time, I'm kind of interested to see how the merger actually is going to work out in the sense of like who's the hierarch and how that like plays out and who's making the decisions. I think like one thing that we kind of are hoping to stray away from is being restricted on a lot of things we're wanting to be creative on. And I think bringing like another production company might create like a lot more problems than fixing them. I don't know, it's just interesting to see like how that's going to work out and how production is going to be handled in that way. But it definitely could make them a lot more money if they do it the right way. But like I said, I don't know too much about that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, right? Like, because acquisitions are fundamentally different than mergers in a lot of cases. And mergers is kind of a mergers of equals type of thing. But with an acquisition, one bigger company is swallowing up a smaller one. In either case, though, you'd have to think it's an IP related strategic move, because if you're merging two production companies, there can only be so many creative leads and stuff like that within the company. So one of them is gonna kind of have to conform to the other, and it just becomes that studio with extra people. So the only thing you really get out of it, you're not getting out of it this entire new creative synergies and all this kind of stuff. It's unlikely that'll happen because it would just dilute the process that you currently have in place. What will really probably happen is you're getting a library of characters and IP and things like that you can now use in your own projects. And that's it. That's the end of the old company, essentially. But, Warner Brothers and Discovery, they merged and they still do their own things. So I guess in things like that, where you're creating like a conglomerate where, you're delving into reality television now but you still have all the HBO and the movies and stuff, and like all the different, parts of the company are headed by different people, then yeah, that's something, and maybe that's what they do in this case. Maybe they have like a larger overarching parent company, like Skydance Paramount or Paramount Skydance or whatever. And that, underneath that, they have the individual Skydance and Paramount, labels still pumping out movies independently. I could see that working as well, but I would have to imagine this is an IP related thing at the forefront. But yeah, so the next one is Jason Statham's A Working Man tops the box office at this latest week here. It debuted at number one, earning 15.2 million. So this surpassed obviously the new movie that came out, Snow White, which saw a really significant drop in the second weekend, down to 14.2 million. But that second weekend drop was, almost as much as the first weekend for A Working Man. Jason Statham, he's that guy. He just does a lot of action movies, and they're mostly kind of mindless. He's in The Meg. He's in the Transporter movies. He's in The Beekeeper, stuff like that. So nothing super newsworthy here, I guess, but it's just, that's what's been happening in the latest in the box office. And, I like to pay attention to that, so I thought it'd be good to share. Then moving on to the last topic here. So actors are recently criticizing the rise of self-tape auditions. After COVID, obviously a lot of things change, not even just in the film industry, but in the regular office environment. A lot of people are working virtual. Tools like even, you and I are not in the same room right now, but we're able to have a conversation and record a podcast. Why is that? Well, because of a video conferencing tool that, rose to prevalence, through COVID and after COVID. And things like this are becoming more and more normalized. But yeah, so a self-tape audition is like when you record yourself at home reading lines and auditioning instead of going and doing it in front of a group of people in person. A lot of people view this as unpaid labor that exacerbates elitism in the industry. Do you think there's anything wrong with self-tape auditions? Do you think people are being dramatic, or I'm curious to hear your thoughts, because it doesn't feel like there's something super wrong with that, but I can also see the angle they're coming from. So I'm curious where you're at on that.
So you're saying people are sending in audition tapes rather than going and doing it in person?
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I could go either way on this just because like if you can't make it to an audition, then yeah, like I could see how recording it and sending it in would still be viable. But at the same time, I see the other side where it's like you're not really seeing, I don't know, because now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more, it's like you would be recorded anyways, like you're making a film.
It looks like the problem that people have with it isn't necessarily that they have to record it and send it in. The problem is that like the casting directors and everything, they're sending like massive amounts of dialogue for these characters, for these actors to learn. They're saying that part of it is like, or the unpaid labor, right? Because they're sending out, you have to
I
think
see what you're
from the
saying.
perspective of an actor, like that self tape is like the first level of screening for a movie now. So like when you want to roll, you always are doing self tapes. But like as an actor, you're doing so many auditions a year. You're doing like a lot of those. So it's just like you're doing that, but you're not being paid. And it's consistent effort each and every time that you have to go through, take all the time, memorize these lines, record these scenes, send them in, and then rinse, repeat every single time a new prospective rolls out there. So from that angle,
I get
I
where
can
it's
certainly tell
like
that there's something
you
up
can
with
be
that.
upset about that, but
But it's still one of those things where it's like it is really really convenient for the casting team to be able to just receive a video and have that take care of it. So I can see both sides, but of course I wouldn't want to do that, put in all that effort, and get denied the role anyways after spending hours learning the lines and everything. So that's my opinion. I think it's a fine line. I get why they're used. They are convenient, but it's people are saying it says it takes 6 to 8 hours for each one, and they're doing hundreds of hours of unpaid labor over the course of a year because casting directors, it's becoming standard for them to submit a wide range of self tapes for producers. Yeah, those are my final thoughts on it. Anything else, or do you want to move on?
yeah, we can go ahead and move on. I just think like it's interesting because if you're going in person, like you should almost still memorize your lines and you're still putting in that work, but like you said, it goes both ways because it probably does take a lot longer to set up like your own camera and all this to produce the short tape that you're sending in rather than just going in and memorizing lines and how you want to portray your character. But yeah, we can go ahead and move on.
Cool. Yeah, so now we're going to move on to a new segment. It's kind of the same segment, but it's just a rapid fire segment. So I'm going to cover some more headlines. We're not going to go too in depth and give our own thoughts or anything. It's literally just going to be a few headlines, and then we'll move on to the next section here. After that, the next segment. Starting now, let's see how fast I can get through these. I'm curious. I'll probably be tripping over my words or something. First one, Minnie Driver exits Angels in Asylum amid financial troubles. So she left the British film after the production ran out of funds. So the crew is unpaid approximately 600,000 euros, was halted 15 days into a planned month-long shoot. So didn't even make it really halfway. Gerard Depardieu faces trial over sexual misconduct, so that's pretty bad, obviously. We do not condone that behavior. Hope the truth comes out there. Noel Clark accused of also the same thing as before, so apparently that's in the headlines a lot recently. These are blind reads for me, so these were compiled for us to read. A Hollywood firm to open a 28 million studio in Scotland, 28 million pounds it looks like. Howland Entertainment, known for its work on films like Planet of the Apes and Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, is opening a 28 million pound studio in Glasgow, creating up to 250 jobs over the next 3 years. So that's really good to hear. I'm glad to hear a film is expanding and growing. Yeah, it's exciting. Matthew Lillard expresses concerns over Scream 7. So at the Tease con event, original cast members of the Scream franchise reunited to discuss their legacy and the forthcoming Scream 7. Matthew Lillard, who obviously played Stu Macher in the original Scream, emphasized his excitement and fear simultaneously about returning to the franchise, emphasizing, his concerns about possibly damaging the legacy of the movies or himself or his character. Obviously, that's, a delicate balance there. You don't want to do too much to dilute what was there before, but you also want to make sure you're adding a new touch for something original and not rehashing things of old. I understand that completely. And then Disney's live action remakes, a comprehensive overview. Disney has been creating live action remakes of its beloved animated classics, starting with Alice in Wonderland in 2010. Really good movie. Notably successful remakes include Beauty and the Beast. Emma Watson was in that one. She did pretty good. The Jungle Book, I really enjoyed that. Couldn't tell you any actors or actresses in it, but I remember enjoying that movie. Snow White is a recent one, though not ultimately largely popular from what I'm hearing. I haven't seen it, so I'm reserving judgment. I don't like to, put too much judgment on people for that. But all the extracurricular stuff, I like to let the performances and things talk for themselves. And Lilo and Stitch is coming out soon, and then obviously Moana 2 came out either earlier this year or later last year as well. That is rapid fire. That's what's been going on recently, so I'm excited about that. Let's go ahead and move into the next segment here. And okay, for our next segment, we're going to be reviewing a film this week. Now, actually, this was supposed to be a film that we reviewed last week. I'll say I never got around to watching it last week, or not last week, sorry, last episode, 2 weeks ago. I never got around to watching it in the time period I was supposed to. Was just busy at every turn, and it's a short movie, so I'm kind of, I wish I had seen it then, but it's okay because now we get to talk about it now. If you guys remember, we talked about Mickey 17 and Novocaine last time, which were both phenomenal. I think this movie was really good, but we kind of teased you with it last time, and we weren't going to tell you what it was, but I can tell you now, and you might have already guessed from the title, but we watched Black Bag. Obviously, this was directed by Steven Soderbergh, had Michael Fassbender, Kate Blanchett, Marissa Abela, among many other talented people. Regine Page, and I'm blanking on the guy that played Freddy. That was Tom Burke. He did a phenomenal job. And then there was also Naomi Harris who played Dr. Zoe Vaughn. Let me just say a couple things about this movie before I dive into my own review. I can kind of give you guys the outlook, what the movie's about, without too many spoilers, and then what the audiences and the critics alike thought about this one. So Black Bag is a gripping spy drama about legendary intelligence agents, George Woodhouse and his beloved wife, Catherine. When she is suspected of betraying the nation, George faces the ultimate test: loyalty to his marriage or his country. And I would say that encapsulates the movie pretty well. It's a short runtime. It's only about an hour and a half long. It's rated R. It's now playing in theaters if you might be able to catch the tail end of the theatrical release. Again, it was directed by Soderbergh, starred Fassbender and Blanchett as the main two characters, obviously George and his wife Catherine, and again Marissa Abela, Tom Burke, Naomi Harris, Regine Page, all had pretty significant roles as well, and Pierce Brosnan in a smaller role. Now, on Rotten Tomatoes, which is never my go-to, and I try not to look at these until after I've seen a movie, but on Rotten Tomatoes, 96% critic score, so 96% for the critics, and then 70% audience score. Black Bag, to me, blew it out of the park, right? So I'm going to go over my review, and then I'll pass it over to Carson and talk about what we thought of that. But that's just a little overview on the film itself. I'll just say I really enjoyed watching this movie in the theater. It was a lot of fun in a short, fast-paced kind of way. The story, held up for me. And I knew I'd like this movie for two reasons. One, it's a spy thriller, a drama movie. I really enjoy those types of movies. And then two, Michael Fassbender. I mean, the guy's awesome. He's awesome as Magneto. He's awesome as, the killer in David Fincher's movie, and a plethora of other roles. The guy can act. And, this movie is not something where you can, take away from that account. If anything, it reinforces that fact even further. I came away liking a lot more than just that, though. The shots in the movie were really, really awesome. The dialogue was snappy. The story was so beautifully and perfectly interwoven that you were taken on a ride from start to finish, trying to piece things together here and there and make sense of it all, and who did it. It's somebody in the story that we've been introduced to, but who? There's red herrings all over the place. Steven Soderbergh flat out did a phenomenal job. Obviously, Fassbender didn't disappoint. Blanchett was awesome. And then some surprisingly good performances from Marissa Abela, who, I shouldn't be surprised about because she was really great in the industry. Naomi Harris, Regine Page, Tom Burke, of course, not because I thought they would be bad, but each of them really added their own taste and element to the story. And I feel like for each character to be memorable in some way, and maybe it was because it was kind of a self-contained, like it was all about this group of people and, it's got to be one of them, right? But, there's an intrigue in the story that came through their performances in a notable standout way. And that's something that you can't say about every movie. So each and every person a part of this film deserves a round of applause. The visuals were great. The music was awesome. This movie is really, really good. And, I'm flat out going to say it. The movie was a 4 out of 5 for me. It's hard for a movie to be a 5. A 4 is like as good as it gets without being literally perfect in my eyes. So, I don't really give out 4.5. I think that's teetering on the edge. I'll reserve that for some movies that are like really good, but like, I have to separate it from my all-time greats, my Mount Rushmore. But this movie's a 4, and in my eyes, that's a damn good score. So, Karsten, I'm curious to hear what you thought. You saw this movie a couple weeks ago, so you really had time to sit on it, marinate. How did you feel about Black Bag? How did you come away? What thoughts did you have about it?
Yeah, I liked it. I don't think I'll score it as high as you. I think my score is probably around like a 3.7. Doesn't mean I don't think it's a good movie. I just think there are a couple things like it really is one of those movies that it depends on what type of movie you like to watch. It's like very slow and kind of drawn out because they're trying to like solve who is the spy or basically the double spy in the agency. And I really liked how they knew who what like they knew the 5 names or whatever, and they took them to dinner, but they didn't know exactly who. Like I didn't even know who was gonna be. They didn't make it obvious is what I'm trying to say. And sometimes some movies try and make it too elaborate, and I don't think it was too elaborate to the point where it like got lost who was the actual like villain or a protagonist or antagonist, sorry. But I think it's definitely one of those movies that like it takes a lot to kind of enjoy because you have to sit through a lot of like slow dialogue and stuff like that. But all in all, I liked it. So yeah, my score is like a 3.7.
Okay. No, that's fair. Yeah, I think largely the feedback is pretty positive on this movie. But again, the audience score is only a 70%. A 3.7 would correspond to like a 74%. So you're definitely well within that range. And that's the great thing about film too, right? It's subjective. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions and thoughts. And I think a 3.7 is, it's not even that far away from my score. A 4 and a 3.7 is 0.3 away. So we're pretty close anyways. I really liked it. I like movies like this. One I'm really excited to do on the show is The Last Mission Impossible. And have you seen the Mission Impossible movies?
I've seen like one of them, but I don't think I've seen, what is it up to like 7, 8 now? Or even further
The
maybe?
8th one's coming out next
Okay.
month. So you got to watch all the 7 before that so you understand. Because this is like the last one. So it's going to be paying a lot of homage to the older ones. Like you got to watch them because we are definitely reviewing that on the show. Spoiler alert for everyone else. That is definitely happening. But it reminded me a lot of a Mission Impossible movie or a James Bond movie, like a spy. Like I love movies like that. The gadgets and things they were using, the intelligence and when Pierce Brosnan was in the room in the conference room and you pressed the button, all the walls turned white. He couldn't see through the glass anymore. I thought
Yeah.
that was hilarious. It was a funny way to use it. I don't know. I like the movie. Can't say enough good things about it. But this is the surprise of today's episode. We only have one movie to watch because we have been so busy and swamped lately. We haven't put together a new list. So we saved this one from the last batch that we put together. It was one of the 3, and then we reduced that to 2, and then this is only 1 this time. But we're gonna go ahead and try to get back to our cadence. It might be something where we do 2 instead of 3. Maybe that's easier for us to maintain. But yeah, that's the only one we got for today. We can go ahead and move into the main discussion, the main segment here, and talk about the thing that was put together for us to speak about. So that today is going to be the recent controversies surrounding Disney's Snow White remake. So that premiered about a week ago now, a little over a week ago. It's sparked a lot of debate. Some of it dealing with the casting choice, some of it dealing with, narrative adjustments, how they changed the story from the original, and then obviously some of it dealing with the lead actress and other actors as far as their public personas and the things that they say on social media and things like that. So one thing about us is we're not going to take like a political stance or anything like that on the show. Everything that we say is just from a news or an information perspective, and so we're not gonna take stances on that kind of stuff. But as far as the film and critiquing that, we will dive into that. We don't want to step on any toes or talk about anything we don't understand. So we're just informing everybody the news itself, and you can form your own opinions and things like that from there. The first one is the casting controversies. So obviously Rachel Ziegler is Snow White in this movie, the titular character. A lot of people thought that because she's a Latina, that she, there's some discussions about how faithful they were to the original Snow White character, and how she was depicted. They questioned the departure of the traditional portrayal, which is supporters highlighted the importance of diverse representation in modern cinema. And from my perspective, it's not that big of a deal, right? Like it's a Snow White movie. It's a fictional character. Who cares if her skin's a little bit more tan than it would have been? I understand, her whole thing was that her skin was like white as snow or whatever, but that doesn't really bother me that much. I'll be honest. I don't know. But then another one is the depiction of the seven dwarves. So Peter Dinklage criticized the film's portrayal of the dwarves, saying that it perpetuated outdated stereotypes. So Disney reimagined the characters, so I guess they're not dwarves anymore. I haven't seen the movie, full disclosure, I haven't, but from what I've heard, they're not dwarves anymore. So that is aiming to address and modernize their representation. So just for the casting controversies, Carson, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on both of those things. So the changing of the dwarves narratively, and then obviously the lead character being of Latina descent or heritage or ethnicity, playing Snow White, who is described in the literature and in the original film as being very, very light, like her skin was very light colored, very fair. I'm curious, what do you think about that?
I don't know. It's definitely a sensitive topic. Like you said, it doesn't feel like it's that big of a deal what her skin tone is and all of that stuff. I think it's interesting because if she was the best choice for the role, then obviously she should get the role. But if it comes to light that it was something that there was obviously other reasons for that choice, then maybe I don't know. I just don't think it's that big of a deal. And it shouldn't be something that should hold the rest of the production down. And then I'm interested to see what you're referring to with them not being dwarves. I think it could be an interesting change to the story, but I kind of find it hard to imagine them not being the seven dwarves. So I don't know. I'm confused on that a little bit, but
I guess they are still dwarves. I don't know. They're just they don't look like, I'm not even really sure what they would have changed here, but they kind of look like cartoonish almost. They don't look like, short people. They look like cartoons, but it's a live action movie. So I'm not really sure if that was the whole thing. They're just going to make them look like fake and made up. I feel like that's almost more offensive than just having regular dwarves, but they don't look real. I don't know. Or maybe this is what it, this looks like fine to me, I guess, but they definitely don't look like real people. And I mean, dwarves are real. I don't feel like we should act like they don't exist or like they're fictional characters. I don't know. Whatever it is, I'm sure it's, it was done with lots of thought and lots of compassion for, the groups of people that they're representing. So I'll err on the side of, believing in, what they intended to do rather than, my perception of it. But I think both of them are fine, right? I think it's, when you think about the target audience of Snow White, is a 7-year-old girl really going to care about either of those things? Probably not. So we're really grasping for straws here. I think we got to keep that in mind. The next thing, though, is the narrative and thematic adjustments. So the remake introduced significant changes in the original storyline, particularly to Snow White's character arc. Rachel Ziegler, the lead actress, emphasized that this new character is characterized by having agency and leadership, contrasting with the passive depiction in the animated film, which came out in 1937. So this modernization was characterized, by having the character be more outspoken and, I can save myself type of thing instead of the old damsel in distress archetype from, the old Disney movies like, Snow White and, Sleeping Beauty and Prince Charming and all of that. But it sparked debates among audiences and critics both, kind of balancing contemporary values with classic narratives. So this is where I can jump in, right? Like, does it matter to me that they wanted the character of Snow White to seem stronger or, stronger willed rather, or of higher agency? No, of course not. Again, I haven't seen the story, so I won't comment too much on exactly what they did or what direction they went with it. But from what I've read and from what I've heard, it's kind of a thing where it's like, it does have narrative implications and the story is changed from the original. So is it really like, it's the ship of Theseus, going back to that, right? You have the ship of Theseus, you replace all of these parts, eventually you replace the whole ship. Like, is it still the ship of Theseus just because it's the same thing and you replace the parts over time? Like, it never came apart, but it's completely new in terms of all of the individual parts themselves, that none of them are the original ship. Is it still the same ship? Is this still the same story? If you're replacing all the parts of the story, even though it's still being told through the same vessel, under the same titulage, is it still the same story? I don't know. Again, I'm not sure, but it sounds like they did change quite a bit. And I'll also just rehash, like, this movie wasn't made for you or I. It wasn't made for, girls our age either, really. It was made for the younger demographic. It was made for girls to see representation of themselves on screen and be proud of what they were seeing and, have something to be inspired by. And so I get it from that perspective, of course. But I do think that that's again another problem with Hollywood, is that we always go back to the same things over and over again. The studio does it because that brings in the most dollars usually, but I think there's a lot of room for growth as far as how we approach, art like this. There can be new things that inspire generations and demographics of people and give them the representation that they long for on screen and that they deserve. Like, I think we can create new things. And, did Snow White have to be remade? Not necessarily. I know they've had success with remakes in the past and they weren't going to stop that, but did it have to be remade? Was anybody really asking for that? I don't think so. I think, if they were, then great. But Disney does a really good job with developing new characters and the new movies that they come out with. Like Moana, or, I think Raya and the Last Dragon is a Disney character that came out in the last 5 years. Like, there's a lot of good ones that they've been doing. And, I feel like people get more out of that and more out of having a new character to look at and believe in and, have an identity with, over rehashing one that already existed and then, upsetting a portion of the population for, changing things. But I don't know. I guess there's more egregious cases of this happening, I'm sure. So what are your opinions on just the narrative changes in general?
I don't know. I hope it doesn't get too far away from the original story. I feel like if it does help empower the younger generation, then so be it. I feel like that's some of the whole point of making new movies like that is show the younger generation older stories. And you just don't want to get too far away from those stories when you're making something like that. And it'll definitely be interesting to see if it does get too far away from it, but I don't know. I'm interested to see the movie now just because of all this.
Yeah, I think we'll have to watch it for the next episode so we can offer some more perspective on this, and maybe we can have a revisiting kind of reflection on it after we've seen it, and maybe we can think about these things while we're watching it and try to piece together our thoughts a little better. But the last thing here is the off-screen political statements. Rachel Ziegler, on one hand, she's very outspoken politically, critiques of presidential administrations. This led to the studio monitoring her social medias very actively. This was in an effort to kind of mitigate potential impacts on the reception of the film. But then on the other hand, Gal Gadot, who plays the Queen, she faced calls for boycott due to her support for Israel during the, ongoing Palestine conflict. Obviously this led to security measures during the film and another layer of controversy. I think she is Israeli. I'm not one to act like I know anything about that conflict. Those two things kind of on the opposite end of one another. And, don't quote me on this. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I think Rachel Ziegler's outspoken in support of Palestine, so Gal Gadot's kind of the opposite of that. I don't know, man. Like, on one hand, I think everybody should be able to express the way that they think and how they feel about political issues, and they should be able to speak out for things they believe in and what have you. On the other hand, I think when you're a high profile person like this, you have a movie coming out, you should bear some responsibility at least to make sure you don't drive people away from the film that you were paid a lot of money to star in and attract people to and promote and what have you. So it's not that she shouldn't tweet these things or whatever. It's maybe she just should wait a little bit until the movie's, had some legs at the box office. And then on the other hand, I'm not familiar with Gal Gadot being on social media or anything like that. That's good. Exercise your right to choose and believe in what you believe in. But there's nothing really more to say about that, right? Like, they can believe what they believe. But in my opinion, if you're paid, however many millions of dollars up front, you sign a contract, you want to see the movie succeed because it's good for your career. But, the studio wants to see the movie succeed because that's their bottom line. So maybe you should, as an actress, actor, whatever, be a little mindful of, your platform and what you represent at the time that you're promoting a big studio picture like that. There's going to have to be some strategy as far as managing reactions and trying not to post or spark inflammatory conversations during times when you're really trying to market a movie. I think it's an important, kind of toe the line type of balance. But anyways, despite, the high production costs that are estimated at $270 million, Snow White has been underperforming commercially. It's only grossed about $88 million globally in its opening weekend. The shortfall, can be attributed some to the controversies, some to the critical reception. Some people just say the movie's not very good, even without all of this stuff thrown in there. And then the evolving landscape of audience expectations, which are ever changing. So there's a few things I want to talk about related to all of this. Questions I have for you, Carson. The first one, balancing tradition and modernization. How can filmmakers honor classic stories while updating them to reflect contemporary values and societal progress so that, as we advance and grow as a society, we're reflecting those new details in our art and in our films, but we're still carrying forward the stories of old? What's the balance for you in your opinion?
I think it depends on how they want to portray the old stories. I think there are a lot of things that they can modernize, but at the same time, you don't want to modernize it to the point where you lose the actual plot of the old story. It's kind of hard to tell, like, specifically, like, because I feel like each story kind of has its own difference. So, like, depending on what story we're actually talking about, like, it'd be kind of hard to be like, oh, well, it's easy to modernize this and keep this of the old plot. So it's really subjective depending on what story we're talking about. But I think for the most part, if you like, I don't know, I feel like I could go both ways just because it's interesting. Like, if you are redoing a story that's already been made in a film, it's like you do almost want to modernize it to switch it up. But at the same time, like, I could see myself wanting it to be the exact same, just with like different characters. So it's like new. With like a little spin to it. Yeah, I think it just kind of depends on the story.
Yeah, for sure. No, it definitely does depend on the story, right? And like, it depends on how important the details that they are changing were to the story also, right? Like, if they're just changing small little things like a color's hair color or a character's hair color or something like that, like, no big deal. I don't think that really matters unless it's like core again to their character. Like, I can think of a few where, like, Merida from Brave being a redhead is like, she's Scottish. That's like core to her identity. Making her, a blonde wouldn't make a ton of sense. Things like that, like, I can see it mattering then. It depends on the story, it depends on the characters, it depends on what's being changed. I agree. A second one here, impact of off-screen actions. To what extent should the personal beliefs and statements of actors influence audience reception and box office performance?
So I was thinking about this when you were talking about Rachel. I think in her case, and like a lot of other actors and actresses' cases, they do have a platform and they should almost give their opinions. But I think the way that Rachel did it, she almost like stepped on too many like toes and she burned a lot of bridges. And I think there's just a lot simpler way of giving out your opinions and not doing what she did. I don't know like the full extent of what all she said and who like she might have hurt, or like I don't know, it's just one of those things that she does have a platform and she has the right to give her opinion. I think it's just she should have gone in a different way to give her opinion.
Sure. For me, it's like I was already saying, if you're in the middle of promoting a movie, maybe hold off on it for now because you're obviously at the top of the press. The second you send something out, it's going to be, number of tabloids are going to pick it up, write a story about it. It's going to get headlines. People are going to hear about it. Maybe just chill out for a little bit, lie low, and then come back and, revoice everything. And I get it. It can feel shackling. It doesn't feel good to think that you can't express yourself and your views. But, movies are made with the intent of getting as many people as possible to watch them. And when you alienate an entire group of political believers or what have you, you're alienating a lot of people, right? Like, as evidenced by the last two elections, right? Two different political parties won. That means there's a significant portion of the population that belong to each political party that all disagree with each other on some degree, form, or fashion. If you alienate one of those, you're losing essentially what is half the United States in terms of your viewership potential. That's not to say everyone who disagrees with her won't go, because plenty of people can look past it, but still, it's just not really worth it to alienate when you're in that sort of setting, in my opinion. And, I fully advocate for her sharing her beliefs and views. And, I know this is not going to make her stop. And I can appreciate that, she doesn't care. She doesn't care what the people are telling her. She's going to do it anyways. And in a way that kind of martyrs her, that makes her, out to be a political outspoken hero and things like that to the people that, share her belief system, and then kind of a political enemy to the people that don't. So it's a two-sided coin, but there's a lot of nuance there, and I don't want to sound ignorant simplifying it down too much, but I'll just say that maybe it shouldn't affect the audience reception or the box office performance, but it does, and that's the reality we live in. So just got to be careful and navigate it carefully. The last one here, role of social media. So in today's digital age, how does social media activity by the cast, crew, production company, etc., affect a film's marketing strategy and public perception?
It should affect it a lot. I think social media and the day and age that we're in, it can be a really useful tool to market the movie. I think if like the actors and actresses have a following, it can easily be used to give out information about the movie, like trailers, and just push more people to go watch the film and get more people excited about it. I think it can also have the opposite effect. Like if people don't like the trailer, or something in the trailer like causes them to not want to watch the movie, then like you kind of lose some money from that. It's definitely something that can get the word out a lot faster than like just putting a trailer in the movie theaters before other movies and on advertisements on TV, because a lot more people are scrolling on Instagram than watching TV. But I mean, either way, it's something that can help, but it can also hurt the production.
Yeah, 100%. It's a very powerful tool, but it can be your worst enemy if you're posting things that people do not, they don't want to see. It's a dual-edged sword for sure. You got to be careful, just like anything else. And it's becoming especially prevalent to how people are choosing and creating informing opinions. And, even seeing your film content for the first time, right? Like clips on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. A lot of people are finding new movies to watch because there's clips on these social websites. And, they'll see an interesting scene and they'll go find it and watch it. A lot of it goes back to the second point, right? Just be careful, navigate it carefully. Don't alienate too many people at the wrong time. That you're welcome to. And this is just me as somebody who's, not even close to that level of following and notoriety, but just be careful, right? Like you don't want to make too many people upset, because that hurts the prospects of the film, which is what you worked so hard in production, what everybody works so hard in production to make possible. And getting it across the finish line is just the first battle, Getting it across the finish line and having it have a good box office run is that much more difficult, especially with a big budget. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty nuanced topic. The whole movie, all the controversies, like we said, we're not going to delve too deep into politics or anything like that. It's just not the way we want to work this show. But all that stuff is important. We do encourage everybody to go and read and educate themselves on what's going on, especially, with the movie, but in the world, everything that's happening, and form your own opinions and try not to take a side before you really know what's going on. But we just wanted to go over that because it's been going around in the film industry, and it's been a pretty big topic lately. So we thought it would be worthwhile to have a little discussion there. But that wraps up the main segment, and we're about to hit an hour, and I think that's a good time to start wrapping it up here. So looking forward, we're going to have some really, really great content for you guys once Marshall's able to come on. We're really excited to have him. He brings a wealth of expertise in the film industry. A lot more than we have. As we mentioned in the first episode, we're kind of beginners. One cool thing that I think we can mention, Carson and I are heading up to Baton Rouge in about a week now to scout some locations for our first feature. So we're really excited about that. We think it's going to offer a lot of insight as far as how we shape and style the story, being able to see the locations in person, visualize the scenes, and put things together that way. And maybe we'll end up making some creative changes based on what we see and find as well. We're super excited for that. That's in the immediate future. And then obviously, like I said, in 2 weeks in the next episode 4, Marshall will be joining us to record, and we couldn't be more thrilled to have him on. He's a great guy. I'm sure Carson would agree with me. He's awesome, and he's really knowledgeable, and he's good to talk to. So he'll be not necessarily a guest, more like a recurring segment. He'll have his own little portion of the podcast where he can detail things. We'll have a little conversation with him each time. But we do want to start having guests in the near future. We're going to try to put those together for you guys. Nothing yet, though, and we don't want to say anything until anything's finalized. So be on the lookout for that, but nothing immediately. And then I just want to take a moment to plug a couple of things. So obviously, Offbend is a startup production company, so any and all support goes a really, really long way. There are ways you can support us for free without buying anything. That is following us on our socials. We're at Offbend on Instagram, at Offbend Studios on X or Twitter, at Offbend Studios at Offbend on YouTube. We're Offbend on Facebook, and then I think that's it, actually. I think that's all the socials that we're on. So go ahead and follow us, interact with our content, our social media, /CMO. She works really, really hard. She puts a lot of effort into the posts and creating engaging content, and it's going to level up soon as we have more behind the scenes and interesting stuff to share with you guys. And so please, if you haven't already, and you want to support us, that's a great way. If you'd like it to take it a step further, we have our OB7 membership. For $8 a month, you get free popcorn at the movie theater, a 12% merch discount. You get your membership card sent directly to you. You get a birthday gift directly from us for free of charge. We'll send it out to you. You get added to our Discord server for community members. You get added to our Instagram close friends, which will have private content. You get added to be able to purchase member-only items to show your support, in addition to some more perks coming soon. And hopefully some ability to get invited to some events and things like that as we put them together. And then obviously we have a lot of items in the merch shop. If you guys would like to go get yourself a little piece of Offbend history, we would be ever grateful for anything there. But those are some shameless plugs. Again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. We're hoping to start rolling out these episodes and getting better at it as we go. So each and every view and ounce of feedback you can offer is tantamount to helping that happen. And yeah, I'll go ahead and let Carson plug a few things and give his closing remarks as well. And we can wrap this one up, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Yeah, just thank you so much for any support. I think Hayden handled all the social media, but I think we're on LinkedIn as well. I don't know if you said that one.
Yeah, we are on LinkedIn.
But yeah, just thank you so much for all the support you can give, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yep. Thank you. Signing off.